Only mode.
Hello and welcome to the webinar Interactive Financial Management. My name is Raul Varela and I'm going to take you through 1 hour of CPE credit on the topic of interactive financial management. Welcome to the webinar. We'll first start off with a few housekeeping items. For those of you that are looking for CPE credit, this webinar is one CPE credit, and there's a few things that you will have to do to make sure you receive your credit. First of all, you must have checked the box when registering to identify the state you're in. You must answer the polling questions that we'll be going through during the webinar, and you also must submit a survey. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can post questions through the webinar screen that you have on your right, and our administrator will be able to see those and will be able to address those questions at the end. If you are having any audio or technical issues, you can also use chat to submit those questions or issues, and our administrator will help you make sure you get set up properly. We're going to start with a brief history of Rivet Software. Rivet is a 10-year-old company that has been focused on financial reporting, XBRL, and interactive financial management since the beginning of 2003. Our first product, flagship product, named Crossfire, was released in 2004. Dragon Tag and Dragon View were released in 2004 and then in 2005. And these tools were showcased by the SEC when the SEC was starting to get and pushing through the XBRL mandate that we know and love today. They used some of these tools as some of the early tools to show the power of what XBRL can do for the financial reporting process, as well as for the financial reporting data and how that can be utilized. In 2006, Rivet was awarded a contract to be create the XBRL filing viewer, and then in 2008 Rivet won the contract to create the rendering engine. Those of you that have been filing or dealing with XBRL or have looked at any of the XBRL filings on the sec.gov site, when you see that rendered view, that was built by Rivet and is still in use today. In 2009, the SEC announced the XBRL mandate for corporations and mutual funds, and Rivet has been helping companies file their financials to the SEC ever since. In 2012, Rivet provided services for over 1,600 corporate filings and over 4,500 mutual fund filings. We were also acknowledged as an Inc. 500, one of the fastest growing companies in our sector and in our state. This is me. My name is Raul Varela, and I am the Vice President of Partnerships. I've been with Rivet for almost 4 years in a number of capacities, and those of us at Rivet are very excited about the current market related to XBRL and the future, which is really what we're going to share with you today. And I guess that's what I look like. Here's our agenda. We're first going to talk about interactive financial management, what it is, what it means. Spend a little time talking about XBRL, going through some areas of leveraging Office. Microsoft Office is one of the key components we feel very valuable for the reporting process. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about disclosure management and what that means to making things easier from a reporting perspective. We'll highlight SEC reporting and some of those aspects. We'll go into data automation. This is a key. We'll spend some time here talking about the ability to use data to make processes easier. And lastly, we'll talk about interactive reporting. Before we dig in too deep, we are going to have our first polling question. The question is, your role within the organization involves which of the following? Creation of XBRL formatted data, review of XBRL formatted data, financial reporting non-XBRL, or none of the above. The poll is open. I see votes coming in. Okay, we have about 80% voted. We'll give another 15 seconds here to let everybody vote. Great. It looks like a large majority, about 43-ish%, review XBRL, involved somehow in the review process. Another 24% are involved in the creation process. 23% are in the financial reporting process but don't deal with XBRL. And the last 10%, none of the above. Great. Great information. Thanks for answering the poll question. Interactive financial management. The definition is the management of financial reporting, financial control, and financial decision-making enabled by XBRL, the global language of finance. Interactive financial management provides the capabilities to extend the last mile of financial reporting to the next mile of financial information. The key here is it's enabled by XBRL, and that's where that interactive capability comes in, and we'll spend some time talking about that. This is an infographic that captures the interactive financial management market. First, to just lay the foundation of the graphic, the left bubble shows sources of information. Things like ERP systems, general ledgers, business intelligence tools, repositories, corporate performance management tools. There are numerous types of sources of data and various sources that capture financial information that are used within the reporting process. On the very right, the bubble here consists of consumers of information. These are data aggregators, investors, anyone that's using public information to make decisions, business decisions, investment decisions, etc. Interactive financial management bridges the gap between the last mile of financial reporting and the next mile of financial information. Let me go through these bubbles briefly, and then we'll dig into some of the details. First of all, Microsoft Office integration. Utilizing Office tools is a key. Being able to use Excel to manage numbers and Word or PowerPoint to create disclosures and documents and reports is key. And having that capability streamlined, very valuable. We'll talk more about that shortly. Disclosure management. The ability to collaboratively work with your colleagues on disclosures and documents. Having document broken down by sections and having one person work on facing financials while somebody else is working on MD&A, while a third person maybe is working on the actual XBRL tags on that content. Again, multi-user collaboration, very valuable with regards to disclosure management. And being able to manage your versions and version control and having that power to keep track of everything that's going on within the disclosure process. Then SEC reporting. Obviously, for companies that are filing to the SEC, being able to have a single source and being able to easily run the validations on XBRL, being able to see the formatting of your Edgarized HTML, being able to have all those things run from one place and easily be able to click a few buttons to submit directly to the SEC. Very powerful in streamlining the process. If we work our way back to the left here, this bubble that says data repository. This is the link to your underlying data source. There are numerous ways to get data out of financial systems and used through the financial reporting process, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. But the ability to streamline that obtaining of that data, very valuable within the process. Now we jump over to interactive reporting. This is where we start talking about the next mile of financial information. Interactive reporting brings together internal data and external data, provides that ability to pull in not just your internal general ledger information or your internal financial reporting information, but looking at external, publicly filed SEC. XBRL now that's filed with the SEC, being able to mesh that together with your internal information. It's very valuable. Investor relations is the ability to publish your press releases, your documents, anything that you disclose from an SEC perspective, make those easily accessible through the internet as you're filing them, as you're creating them, using a single application to do all of that. And then lastly, financial analytics. There is a huge opportunity here and potential that is just starting to, the surface is just starting to be scratched here with analyzing of this public information that's now filed with the SEC. Running financial models, building investment analysis, not just looking at SEC data, but now looking at other XBRL sources, whether it's an international mandate or maybe it's FDIC data that's now bank information that's published with the FDIC, which is published in XBRL. The ability to use this information, this machine-readable XBRL information, standard information, to make decisions. So interactive financial management helps answer one question: where did this number come from? I'm sure it's a question that most of you, if not every one of you, out there listening to this webinar have either asked somebody or been asked by somebody. Where did this number come from? The SEC example. I'm a CFO just about to submit my filings to the SEC, my 10K. We've been through numerous cycles. We're just about to submit, and I'm looking at one last table, and I see one number that just doesn't match what I'm thinking. Something's wrong with this number. Where did this number come from? I can double-click what I'm looking at and flow myself directly back to the source of information. Ah, I see where this number comes from. Here are the transactions that make that up. Great. I'm comfortable. Let's submit it to the SEC. That same question can be said for a portfolio manager. I'm a portfolio manager about to make a big investment decision in a new equity that I haven't held before. I have my analysis, my model, my valuation, everything else that I put together, but there's one number that just does not look right. Where did this number come from? I need to make sure I'm comfortable here before I make this big investment decision. Where did this number come from? Double-click and drill back directly to the SEC filing in XBRL that company filed. Very valuable, and this interactive capability is enabled by XBRL and a standard global language of finance. All right, before we jump into the details of some of these bubbles that we just went through, let's go through another polling question. The polling question is, how are you currently using XBRL? You can check all that apply. Create SEC filings, analysis of external financial data, analysis of internal financial data. My vendor does all the XBRL for me, or none of the above. All right, I see the votes coming in. All right, about 90% have voted, and it looks like the majority are using XBRL to create SEC filings, about 62%. 11% use it for the analysis of external data. 7% use it for the analysis of internal data. That's great. 33% say that my vendor does it for me, and 13% say none of the above. Great. So we have quite a few people that are involved in the creation process of the SEC filing, so that's great. I'm also intrigued that a number of respondents are using XBRL for either external or internal financial information. That's great, and we're going to share some examples around that as well. Let's move on. XBRL. We're just going to spend a few minutes talking about XBRL. It seems like from the polling questions, most of the folks on the line have a pretty good understanding and are somehow using it. XBRL stands for Extensible Business Reporting Language. It's a standard language used to categorize and add descriptive information to financial numbers. That descriptive information many times is called metadata. We use an analogy of a barcode. XBRL is like a barcode. Let's use a can of green beans as a very quick example. I have a can of green beans at the grocery store. I scan my can of green beans at the cash register. Now, that cash register has a lot of information, machine-readable information on that can of green beans. It knows that the can of green beans is $1.69. It knows it's a brand Del Monte. It knows it's 12-ounce can and that its expiration date is March 31st of 2013. All that information now quickly, instantaneously understood by the machine, by the cash register. Now the grocery store can do something with that information. We now use it for inventory. The grocery store manager now can get an alert when the last can of green beans is sold. We have to buy some more cans of green beans. They can also do deeper analytics. Things like, we sell a lot of green beans on Thursdays. Maybe we should raise our prices on Thursdays or try to get some of the other days selling more cans of green beans. That's what XBRL brings to financial information. You have a financial number, 5 million. That number has no context. XBRL brings the context to that number. With XBRL, you now can say this 5 million is cash and cash equivalents on the balance sheet. It's for company X. It's as of 12/31/2012, and it's in US dollars. Just a sample of some of the context that XBRL can bring to the table. What does XBRL look like? Can anybody read this? Hopefully nobody rose their hand, but if you did, then you can get into the XBRL geek, as we like to call it here at Rivet. This is really the encoding. This is under the covers. This is what XBRL looks like under the covers. It's the encoding of the metadata to those numbers. This is what's then rendered by the SEC's rendering engine. This is what then is interpreted by machines. Machines can read this. Human eye, a little more difficult. Machine readable, that's the key. The mandate, many of you are already filing. Just to highlight a few things here. The mandate started in 2009, and it was in 3 waves. The first wave of companies, about 500 or so, have been filing for coming up on 4 years now. They have, as of 2011, are no longer protected by limited liability. The second wave of filers, as of 2012, the summer of 2012, were no longer protected by limited liability. The third wave, coming later this summer, 2013, they will no longer be protected by limited liability. What does that mean? Well, you should ask your legal counsel for the official response, but on a basic level, it means your XBRL is filed, not furnished. So you are now subject to the same level of scrutiny as any of your other filings. Something to keep in mind when you think about quality and you think about the XBRL filing process and streamlining that process and making the accuracy and quality more and more efficient. Real briefly, XBRL is international. Obviously, there's a lot of us that deal with the US and the SEC mandate, but there are mandates all over the world, and this is just a snippet of some of the jurisdictions and provisional jurisdictions of XBRL projects going on out there, and they're all over. Different types of mandates, like tax authorities. The HMRC in London stands for Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. That's a tax mandate. So it's like our IRS here in the U.S. Other stock exchanges all over, Asia, Europe, there's banking mandates. XBRL is everywhere. And what does this now provide from a value perspective is now that data can be used in context or in connection with SEC U.S. information. This is a snapshot of some firms that are using XBRL today. We hear the question a lot, who's using it? Let's start with the SEC. Many of you have heard of the RoboCop initiative that the SEC has. They're actually using, they have analysts very well versed in XBRL. I actually know a few of them personally. They are digging into this XBRL information. They are running models and other analytics on what's being filed. I'm sure initially focusing on some of the problematic areas, but long term, this is going to be their way to find red flags, find things they need to dig into deeper. Auditors, you know, the Big Four and even the Big 8, Big 10 accounting firms, they're starting to use some of the XBRL information in their audits, etc. The data aggregators are starting to bring in and incorporate XBRL into their legacy processes. There's universities that are starting to get very involved and really, it's key for them to train the next generation of accountants on how to use XBRL, how to tie in this kind of the accounting concepts related to the reporting process. Lastly, I'll mention SWIFT and the DTCC. They are working closely with XBRL US to put a corporate actions XBRL. It's not a mandate yet, but they're working towards getting corporate actions standardized and making that corporate actions process streamlined. Now let's jump into one of the bubbles, Microsoft Office integration. Before we do that, let's go to another polling question. The polling question is, what Microsoft Office tools do you use for internal and external financial reporting? And you can check all that apply. So our view is that a majority of you use these tools. Let's see what the survey says. Give a few more seconds here. Okay, we have about 85% voted, and Excel, 93% of people use Excel, 88% use Word, 36% use PowerPoint, and another 34% use some type of general ledger reporting tool. Great. That is what we expected, and we see the value in using some of these Office tools. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why Office? First of all, everybody uses it. Everybody knows it. All accountants know how to use Excel, and it's probably one of the biggest tools they use on a day-to-day basis. And it's very good for managing numbers. Word and PowerPoint, also well-known used tools that are very good at creating documents and disclosures presentations. Using those capabilities within the reporting cycle is very valuable. The ability to link Excel information into a Word document as an example. There are ways to do this natively in Microsoft Office, but to have it done in a managed way is very valuable. This example shows numbers here in Excel being linked to a Word document. This 2502 can be linked to a table, can be linked to narrative, can be linked to numerous different sections within a document, and can even be linked to other documents, so that when that 2502 changes, you change that number once in Excel, and then the links to the disclosures and any other reports are then automatically updated. Our experience has shown this to be very valuable for clients that we work with and other people we've seen in the industry. It comes down to the ability to manage numbers in Excel. Accountants love that. And then being able to share those or link those numbers into the Word disclosures, keeping the formatting, keeping all the XBRL, anything else that you might have around that disclosure intact. Extend that same concept to PowerPoint. Use then those same numbers to populate things like board books, board packages, any other internal reports, whether it's a Word document or a PowerPoint or ends up being a PDF or even just something that you share on the web. Having the ability to manage the numbers in a streamlined Excel mechanism, then being able to populate reports, charts, graphs, anything within a PowerPoint. Our experience has shown companies wanting to do this more and more. Case study on an energy provider in the South. Their challenge was manual processes. They had hundreds of changes, manual, handwritten, just very, very manual. Very problematic, especially when you're talking about deadlines and filing requirements, etc. Their solution? Using linking between Excel and Word to help allow them to manage their numbers in Excel and manage the disclosures in Word. They ended up linking over 1,000 different things from Excel to Word. They went a little linking crazy. it really provided value for them in not having to go and find, where is this number? Okay, this number changed. Where are all the places within my document where that number is? Oh, it's here, here, and here. Oh, and it's here too. Make sure you change. No, you don't have to do that anymore with the Excel linking that this particular company was able to implement. Now we'll talk a little bit about disclosure management. Disclosure management ties very closely to Microsoft Office. It's really around collaboration. Being able to use multi-user, and we talked about a little bit before, having one person work on balance sheet, a second person working on the earnings per share footnote, a third person working on MD&A, and a fourth person managing some of the XBRL on top of that content. Making the reviews of the documents and disclosures easier for your auditors, for your legal group, for anybody else that might not be involved in the creation but are very much involved in the review process, making that easier for them to access those sections that they need to look at and review. Being able to use multiple documents, so not just the disclosure that goes to the SEC as an example, but populating board books or earnings scripts or any other internal report that might be using those same numbers, managing them in a single data set. Version control. No longer being worried about pencils down. You have a change to a piece of content, you change that piece of content in your document. Everything else around it stays intact using those familiar Office tools. Case study, Cardtronics. This is a quote from Mitzi Pierce. She's the Director of External Reporting at Cardtronics. I'll give you a quick second to read her quote. Mitzi has streamlined her team's reporting process. She's using the disclosure management and Office integration concepts that we've been talking about to make her process easier. And she's a big fan of using those things to make her life easier, her and her team's life easier. It's really about streamlining that capability. Now let's talk for a few moments about the actual SEC reporting process, which many of you are familiar with. Public companies are required to submit XBRL and Edgarized HTML filings for their 10Qs and their 10Ks. Creating these filings from a single source, being able to test file and live file directly from this source, being able to see all the XBRL attributes, being able to see the formatting and what the HTML, Edgarized HTML looks like, managing all those things from one source. Very valuable for clients we've seen in this industry. The ability to roll forward quarter to quarter. You finish your second quarter, you're ready to start working on your third quarter. That shouldn't be a start from scratch process. Make a few clicks, roll forward from Q2 to Q3. That's what it should look like. The ability to do that is key. Eliminate the pain of last-minute changes. Ultimately, what this does helps you gain control of that filing process. You're no longer relying on anybody else to manage this content, to manage the XBRL, to manage the filing process. Gain control. Another case study, a company called Sussex Bank. Their challenge was really within the timelines, the process, the challenges with wasted time. Their solution, utilizing a single source system, their ability to test file and then file directly with the SEC, streamlining kind of those last-minute changes and the process of controlling their own timeline. And their result, they actually beat their deadline by 2 days. That's great, but not only that, they saved 5 days overall and saved $4,000. So that's a quantitative efficiency gain right there. Now we will spend a few minutes talking about data repository and integration into underlying systems. But before we do that, we have another polling question. The question is, within your organization, how is data currently pulled for your reporting documents? Manually by the financial reporting team, it's done by your IT department, or data is linked from your ERP or GL to Excel or some other process. We will give a 15 more seconds. I see the votes coming in. All right, we have about 88% of the respondents have voted, and it looks like the financial reporting team manually is the winner, 66%. The IT department, only 2%, and 24% have some type of link to an ERP or GL system, and 8% said other. Great. It's expected that the financial reporting team has a key role in pulling that information. Let's talk a little bit about how that can be streamlined, if it isn't already, for your organization. This diagram shows the ability to pull data from numerous different types of data sources into a structured format like XBRL, and then to use that structure to do reporting. We call that structure the enterprise taxonomy. You can think of an enterprise taxonomy as a chart of accounts. It's the chart of accounts view into pulling that information. So the graphic here shows, first on the left, numerous different entities or data sources. You can think of them either way. There's Excel financial reports. Maybe there's ERP systems combined with other financial reports. And then there's just ERP and general ledgers as well. You might be pulling information from a number of different areas. The ability to take all that information and standardize it with something like XBRL into a standard structured data format then allows and enables accounting and finance professionals to then easily pull that information to create any kind of collaborative reports, financial models, variance analysis, board presentations in PowerPoint, company comparisons. Really the key is it enables these professionals to easily be able to pull the information in the way that they view the information, in their chart of accounts, in that view of their chart of accounts. So making that information easy for them to access, pull, and pull together. Case study, energy company called Helix Energy. Helix had a challenge around manually entering data. They had various sources. They had a problem every quarter having to manually pull this information and populate reports. Their solution, they used a link into their underlying general ledger. In this case, they use Oracle Financials. They now are able to directly pull their GL information to populate their disclosures. The result, they save time and effort, and it helps them ensure the accuracy, because as soon as they close their books in Oracle, they're ready to pull that information, and then they manage the disclosure from there. If they have updates to Oracle, they simply click refresh, and that data populates those disclosures automatically. A quick side note about Helix, they actually believe that they're ultimately going to save money on audit costs as well because of how they've streamlined this process. They think their auditor processes are going to be much more smooth and streamlined, a big part because of how they've implemented their flow of data from Oracle Financials all the way through to their disclosures. A quick reminder, if you have questions, we will be spending a few minutes at the end answering the questions, so send your questions through the webinar mechanism, and we'll be able to address those at the end. Now let's talk a little bit about interactive reporting. Everything we've talked about up to this point has been very much focused on the last mile of financial reporting. Data from ERP, GL systems flowing into Office and Office integrated tools through the disclosure management process to ultimately file with SEC. What interactive reporting does is it's the first component of that next mile of financial information. So let's spend a few minutes talking about that. This graphic shows information sources at the top, reports and other ways to share information at the bottom, using Microsoft Office and Crossfire in the middle. The top are these same sources, many of the same sources that we've already talked about: Excel, enterprise financial or ERP systems, corporate performance management tools, BI tools. The fourth box here is really the key: market data and public information, SEC information, Tokyo Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange, public information that can now be incorporated side by side with internal data. So that's really what interactive reporting brings to the table: the ability to mesh your internal information with external information, public information. It enhances the analysis capabilities and other reporting tasks when you now have access, easy access, through the same mechanism. The same way you pull internal information to create a report or a disclosure, use that same mechanism to pull public information. The reports you can build, it's unlimited. We show a few examples here of an annual report, an interactive board book, whether you're sharing it just as a web report, whether you're doing peer comparisons, or even announcements like press releases. The ability to use all that data within not only your disclosure process, but how you communicate with external parties as well as internal parties. Case study: National Health Investors. National Health Investors, or NHI, they are a REIT, a real estate investment trust. If there are any REITs out there logged in, you know that REIT reporting, there are specific things that REITs report, and NHI particularly have a number of specific financial attributes and ratios on their performance, on their financial performance that they want to compare themselves to their competitors on these attributes and ratios. So what they've done is they've brought in 17 of their closest competitors, other REITs within the industry. They've created some reports based off of those 17 companies filed XBRL to the SEC to highlight those ratios that they want to compare themselves against. And every quarter, whenever one of those 17 competitors files with the SEC, NHI simply clicks refresh on their report, and they're able to get the most up-to-date information. And what they're able to do with that now is see how they're doing in their industry compared to their competitors on those specific attributes. It's really valuable, especially because they can do it before they file. Before NHI files, they can pull in these 17 other competitors and say, okay, well, here's what our quarterly performance is going to look like. Here's what our 17 competitors have looked like. Okay, here are probably some of the questions we might have to answer to our investors. Or here are some of the areas we need to improve from an internal perspective. Or here are some of the areas where we're really doing well compared to our competitors, specifically on our metrics. So very valuable ability to pull in that information and very easily use it so you can read. We have a case study I think we have published as well that has some more information about NHI. All right, we have another polling question. And the polling question is, of the areas covered today, I'm most concerned with XBRL and the SEC, disclosure management, Microsoft Office integration, data flow and accuracy, interactive reporting. We will give the audience another 30 seconds to answer the last polling question. I see the votes coming in. Okay. It looks like 90% of the votes are in. About 48% are most concerned with XBRL and the SEC. 8% are concerned with disclosure management. 16% are most concerned with Microsoft Office integration. And 16% are concerned with data flow and accuracy. And 11% are concerned with interactive reporting. Pretty good mix, with the majority being concerned around XBRL and SEC, which makes sense, and then the rest fairly equal. Office integration and data flow, both at 16%. Okay, great. Great information. All right, we are back to the interactive financial management infographic. Once again, this market bridges the gap between the last mile of financial reporting and the next mile of financial information, utilizing XBRL to enable that interactivity, to help answer the question, where did this number come from, no matter where you are in the process. The data that is already available and the more and more data that's going to be available to investors and to anybody making information is key. Investors using this information are limited at the moment, but it's going to continue to grow. And linking in external information with your internal information is another key area that current company filing registrants can use today to enhance their reporting and analytics. In conclusion, we have gone over the interactive financial management market. We have talked about XBRL, spent some time going through some ways to leverage Microsoft Office and the Office tools that most of you know and love and are familiar with. the disclosure management process and how that collaboration is valuable, SEC reporting and some of the nuances around the XBRL and EDGARized HTML filing, data automation, ways to integrate numerous data sources into a structured format and utilize that to streamline some of the reporting processes, and then lastly, interactive reporting and the ability to mesh external public data with your internal information to enhance the current reporting that you're already doing. Great. We are going to open it up for questions. It looks like we have a few that have come in already. Before I get to these couple of questions, I will send a quick reminder that we have another one CPE credit webinar on Wednesday, June 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern, which is focused specifically on Microsoft Office best practices. Hopefully you can join us for that webinar. Okay, looks like the one question was about, should regulators be included in the consumers of information? Yes, absolutely. So in the infographic, and actually I'll just bring it up again real quick. Great question. There are actually a number of other consumers of information. This isn't an exhaustive list. Regulators is a key one, and we mentioned RoboCop and what the SEC is starting to do there. That is absolutely should be mentioned when you talk about consumers of this information. Filing XBRL data for U.S. companies via EDGAR. Where would one go to find XBRL data for foreign filers? Good question. You would have to go to the regulatory body to capture that financial information in international mandates. So for example, HMRC, you'd have to go to the HMRC to get information. And by the way, some mandates, like HMRC specifically, didn't really share that openly because those are tax returns. So they're not going to make all tax returns openly available. Now, something they can do is they can consolidate that data and show consolidated sets of information. These many people, filed these type of things. So, but again, you'd have to go to the regulatory body to get that specific information. Another question was about Canadian public companies and when will they file. That's a great question. I really don't have an answer. We've heard over time that it was making progress. Nothing has come from it in the near term. So really, it would be a guess if I put anything out there. I do think that Canadian firms will be filing at some point. The question of when, that's one for the SEC. Let's see here. Okay, somebody asked about the process of setting up linking. Can you do it on your own, or do you have to rely on Rivet? Great question, and it really is. It depends. Is the answer. We have had clients that we've shown them half an hour, and we show them here's how you link, and they go crazy and do things like the one energy company we showed you that has 1,000 links. And they start linking everything, even things that are not XBRL specific. Usually they start with the facing financials, go to the footnotes, and then jump into the MD&A. So as you know, MD&A does not have to be tagged in XBRL, but it's still part of a K, as an example. So if there's a number that's shared in the balance sheet and in a footnote and in the MD&A, why only link 2 of the 3? Link all of them. And so the answer is it's very easy to link. Rivet does help along the way, and we've actually helped structure a lot of the notes and things and how the linking works for many of our clients. But again, we've had clients that have picked it up in half an hour and jumped all over it, especially if they're savvy in Excel and Word, because that's a lot of what we show and what we teach, and that's what with the other CPE event that I mentioned in a couple of weeks, we'll be talking about some of those best practices from an office perspective. Best practices regarding creating a data repository. That's a good question. You know, each link into a data repository is a little bit specific to the organization. And again, we use the term of chart of accounts as that's what we end up using when we link to an underlying data source. We work with that particular client on, well, what is your chart of accounts? What is the information that you're trying to pull? Then what does your data source look like? And then using that mechanism to create the link. And the Helix example, the case study around Helix, and they use Oracle Financials. That's exactly what we did with them, and ended up using their chart of accounts. So when they pull information, whether it's for a disclosure or for some other report, that chart of accounts is what they use to pull that information. Another question about what makes your Crossfire product better than your competitors. You know, if you see this interactive financial picture here, there's a lot of people, a lot of vendors that are doing SEC filing. And there are some vendors that can provide some of the disclosure management capabilities. You know, I would say a couple of the key differentiators for Rivet's product and how we fit into this interactive financial management market are the link into the underlying data, the data repository, Microsoft Office integration and utilizing those tools that we feel are very valuable to be used within this process, and leveraging all the capabilities that they already have, that those tools already have. And then lastly, interactive reporting and that access to the next mile of financial information and the ability to mesh that public or external information with your internal information. We find clients are using this more and more and becoming more and more valuable. Will this webinar be available for viewing at a later date? Yes, it is being recorded, and it will be available for access. We will also send an email with a link to it, those of you that have been on. Is it possible to get copies of the presentation? Absolutely. That will be made available. There was a few other questions around linking and how do you keep data links from becoming corrupt and when locations changes and all that. That is really the key of how we've put our flavor of managing those links. Because I assume what some of these questions are about are, you know, when you link Excel and Word today, there's a lot of challenges. So we've put our controls around those links and made those links available not just in Word, but in PowerPoint. And ultimately, they'll be accessible in any Microsoft product. You could link a number to an email at some point is the vision, but it's our management of those links. So that's kind of some of our Rivet proprietary secret sauce and how we've made that work. But it's a very good question. There's a few questions about CPE credit. You will get an email following this with CPE information. You have a survey that you'll have to fill out, and you'll get it within a week following the conclusion of this webinar. I think we'll take one or two more questions. Let's see here. There's a question about prior year's numbers being pulled in when you have a data repository. You know, how do you pull them in? You have to do things manually when you're pulling prior year data. No, everything is driven off of, there's a date concept. We actually call it a calendar. So whatever attribute you're looking at, it always has to have a calendar or a date associated with it. So you will always know if you're pulling prior year, future year, I guess you wouldn't pull future year, but prior year or current quarter, prior quarter, you'll always have that date accessible. Okay, last question is about training. How do we train? few other questions around training. We do a couple of different things for training. We have an online learning management system called Rivet University, and it is a web-based application that you log into and go through modules, learning all of the different aspects of the interactive financial management arena, and specifically around the uses of our flagship product Crossfire, XBRL, Edgarization, all those aspects directly. We also have in-house training. We have some what we call boot camps, which are usually focused around XBRL and kind of the filing process, but we're expanding that to be more around just kind of the reporting process in general. We have boot camps. We're located here in Denver, so we have some boot camps that we've done in Denver, which are also CPE sponsored. In fact, one of them is a full week. That's our full boot camp is a 40-hour CPE event that after leaving that, you will know everything you need to know about XBRL filing. So we do a number of different training, and all those things kind of combine to provide you with everything you need to be as familiar with all the aspects of XBRL and our solutions. I think that is it. Let's see, did we get one more? Okay, so there are a few more questions that have come in, and we will get to those questions separately outside of the webinar. I'd like to thank everyone that attended. Hopefully this was valuable, sharing the interactive financial management market, and hopefully you got some value out of the hour that you spent with us. Thank you for everybody's time. Bye-bye.